Go ahead and be seated.
If you were to answer the question, what do you need right now? How would you answer that? What would you like to have that you don't have? What would be your answer? If I were to give you a minute to even jot some things down, what makes the list for you? What do you need that you don't have? Here's the stuff that we might say. We might say, well, I really want peace right now, or maybe less stress, or maybe good health, or maybe you're saying I need a big screen HD TV, or maybe it's a new car, or maybe for you it's wisdom or education, or maybe for you it's new shoes. I mean, Cinderella might be right. One shoe can make all the difference. You never know, right? There's a lot of stuff that we need, a lot of things that we think we need. And I suppose how we answer that question reflects what's going on in our lives at the moment. If you were to answer the question, what does it mean to be needy? How would you answer that question? And for me, when I think of needy, I think of someone like maybe somebody in a developing country, or in a third world country, places where I've been and seen people who have needs, who are needy. Or maybe it's that person that we've seen, all of us, on the corner with a sign who looks so destitute. Maybe we would say they are needy. And I suppose it's true. If we are lacking something, we are in need of it. Some people are desperately needy. But there is another kind of needy that I think actually describes a whole bunch of us in this room. Needy in ways that we don't recognize, needy in ways that really cripple us in so many ways. We're needy because we actually have too much. We have too many things. We have access to too much stuff. God says it this way in the book of Revelation. Revelation is the Apostle John writing these reflections from God, these visions he has from God. And early in Revelation, there are these letters to the churches, to the believers. And in Revelation chapter 3, verse 17, here's what the scripture says. You say that I am rich, I have acquired wealth, and I don't need anything. But you don't realize that you are wretched, pitiful, poor, blind, and naked. Here's what God is saying to these believers. You're saying that you don't need anything. You've got all you need. And I'm saying to you that you are desperately needy. Solomon said it like this in the book of Ecclesiastes. There is a grievous evil which I've seen under the sun, riches being hoarded by their owners to their own harm or detriment. Sounds needy. I'm needy. And we get consumed by stuff, don't we? There is this huge obsession we have to get more things. Now, it didn't work out this way. It wasn't like you woke up one morning and said, you know what, I actually think I'd like to have a lot more stuff. I want to get so much stuff that it actually chokes my heart off. None of us woke up saying that. None of us graduated from college and said, you know what, I think really my major pursuit will be getting everything I can. Well, actually, maybe some of us did graduate from college with that as our major pursuit. We could be described as needy. That something is lacking, desperately missing in our lives. Friday night, Dinah and I were invited down to Dallas for it's kind of a pre-premiere of a movie that's releasing nationwide in October. And great movie. It'll be a terrific movie. It was done well and speaks to a lot of big deal issues. And we were invited down to Glenn Beck's studios where it was being hosted. And there were some speakers they had in, and they were talking about what's going on kind of culturally today. And Glenn Beck actually shared some information that was fascinating to me. They were talking about just the movie industry. Do you realize there are 20,000 movies made a year globally? That's a lot of movies. Some of you are trying to see all of those. That's a lot of movies. And about 600 of those movies have some kind of decent-sized release. About 300 of those are released in major way through theaters. And of those 300, there are about 100 that actually become popular movies. But the blockbusters, last year there were 34 blockbuster movies. They generated at least $100 million. in net revenue. I read this morning that Avengers just grossed over $1 billion after this weekend. $1 billion, that's a lot of people going to the movies. We're spending, the number one thing the U.S. exports, we export a lot of things, but the number one thing we export is entertainment. And here's the deal. The whole point of this was we live in a culture that wants to be entertained, that we want to get, and here's what we're afraid of in our culture today, and it probably drives a lot of what we've got going on right now in our desire to have so much stuff. We become such consumers. We're constantly consuming, looking for things, because there is this acronym they use that describes so many of us. It's FOMO. Anybody know what that means? FOMO. It's the fear of missing out. That somehow, that if we don't participate, if we don't have this, if we don't see this, if we aren't engaged in this, if it doesn't fit into our experience, that we will miss out. And social media has actually lit that fear on fire for us. They were talking about it this way, that 50 Shades of Grey, they said, was a really poorly done movie. Now, is it actually like not a really good subject, but it's a poorly done movie. And yet, 50 Shades of Grey was popular because people were afraid of it. It was marketed purely with this message: don't miss this movie. So if you saw 50 Shades of Grey, don't tell me about it. I don't want to know that you did. But it's that fear we have. That somehow we're not going to take hold of what others are taking hold of. And as it drives us to getting more things, consuming more things, our heart gets consumed in the process. The Apostle Paul was mentoring a young man. His name was Timothy. He was bringing him up. It was like Timothy was his understudy. This young man who was following in his footsteps. And in fact, today we would call it that he was coaching him. And he gives some insight to him. He gives some instructions to him, but also some kind of things that are happening in people's lives. 1 Timothy chapter 6, there are 3 things that I think happen to us that cause us to get trapped by stuff, by our consuming. Here's what he says in verse 6. 1 Timothy 6, down in verse 6. But godliness with contentment is great gain, for we brought nothing into the world, and we can take nothing out of it. But if we have food and clothing, we will be content with that. Here's what Timothy is saying. You came into the world and you didn't have anything in your hand, and you're going to exit this world and you won't take anything with you. And we all kind of get that. But then he says this, but in between the entering and the exiting, we are consumed with grabbing everything we can. That we're about trying to get more stuff, that we are so dissatisfied. And that dissatisfaction raises up in our lives in so many ways. Marketing is designed to create for you a dissatisfaction, that there is something you don't have that you should have that others have. Look how happy their lives are, and your life will be just as happy if you get it. And so, what do you and I do? We go and buy things we don't need from people we don't like with money we don't have. Because we know that will make our lives feel better. We're so dissatisfied. We get bored. We get stuff and then we get bored with it. So we go get more stuff and we get bored with that and we get more things. Tina Sinatra, Frank Sinatra's daughter, wrote a memoir about her dad. Her dad is such an incredibly popular public figure. Here's what she said about her dad. My dad was a man who all his life looked outside for what he was missing inside. And that wouldn't just describe Frank Sinatra. In some ways that describes us. In some ways that could describe me. That we get pushing for things. We're dissatisfied. And maybe we're dissatisfied because the way we keep score is by how much we have. How much stuff we have, what kind of cars we drive, what clothes we wear, the size of our homes, or what things we enjoy, how much money seems to be at our disposal. Only to discover that what we have is never quite enough. What we need is we just need just a little more. The second thing that happens to us that Paul describes here is down in verse 9. We're undisciplined. Here's what he says. Those who want to get rich fall into temptation and a trap and into many foolish and harmful desires that plunge people into ruin and destruction. I read yesterday that the majority of Americans believe that you are rich when you're making at least $150,000 a year. And that sounds like, wow, that would be true. If we could make $150,000, there are a lot of things we could do with that money that would make our lives better. But the truth is, there are a whole lot of people who make $150,000 who are experiencing the same thing that people who are making $50,000. They're stressed financially. They're in debt in ways that they don't see a way out of. You know that 92% of us experience some financial stress. 80% of us in the U.S. say that we are living paycheck to paycheck. In other words, we get ourselves so pressed. The average household in the U.S. has 13 credit cards or debit cards. There are 2 payday loan locations for every single Starbucks there are in our country. And those payday loan places, you're paying 400% interest annually. Why are we doing that? Because we are so desperate in getting some of the stuff we want to have. And it traps us. It gets a hold of our hearts in so many ways. The majority of Americans actually think that one day they're going to win the lottery and that will solve all their problems. We get in a lot of trouble when it comes to chasing after stuff. Most of us in the room, most of us, according to every survey, have no idea where we are financially, let alone have some kind of budget or plan that will help us move forward. The third thing he gives us is why we get in so much trouble with stuff is down in verse 10. He says, but the love of money is a root of all kinds of evils. Here's one of those verses in the Bible that constantly gets misquoted. You'll hear people say, money is the root of all kinds of evil. But that's not actually true. Money is neutral. It's neither positive or negative. What happens with money in the hands of the holder is what's either positive or negative. The root of money, the love of money is the root of all kinds of evil, Paul says, and some people, eager for money, have wandered from their faith and have pierced themselves with many kinds of grief. We've found our value in our stuff. We keep score that way. There are things that are external to us that we believe are going to fix what's internal to us. We've placed our hope in the wrong thing. Now, don't misunderstand. We need money to function. Money provides for us the ability to live and to make ends meet and all those kinds of things. But it is when we get consumed by our stuff that we get in so much trouble today. In fact, it gets such a hold on our lives that we end up making really poor decisions, and we complicate those with even poorer decisions. In fact, here's how Paul describes it. And for some believers, it gets enough of a hold on your faith, your heart, that you wander from your faith. Now, here's what he means by that. It doesn't mean that you've quit doing religious stuff. It doesn't mean that you quit showing up at church or singing songs or taking communion or maybe even serving somewhere. What he's saying is that you get enough on your heart that you no longer really trust God. You trust your ability, you trust your resources, you trust your stuff, but it is no longer, you have wandered from your faith and create all kinds of grief in our lives. And all of us have experienced that, or we know people where we've seen that happen in their lives. So what do we do? How do we get past this needy situation we end up being in? Well, the Bible has an answer for us, and it's interesting how often the Bible takes what we think ought to be one way and flips it on its end. For example, Jesus said, if you want to be first, you have to be last. If you want to be great, you have to serve, right? I knew we'd get the first one. Most of us missed that second one. You want to be great, you got to serve. You want to have a lot? You want to have more? The biblical answer for that is to give. It's generosity. Now don't, it's not this. It's not that television thing you've seen. Well, you just give your money to God and He'll give you more. You'll get a new boat. You'll get a new car. You'll have everything you ever wanted to have in your life. You're going to get it. That's the best imitation of that I got, because that stuff's like garbage, right? That isn't true. The Bible doesn't say you're going to give so you can get more stuff. You're going to give, and you'll be blessed in ways you have no idea, no way to measure. That if you want to be less needy, give more. And that flips on end. The great American philosopher Forrest Gump said, when someone says they're here to help you, hang on to your wallet. So hang on to your wallet, because I want to help you here with 3 things that I think giving will do for your heart. First is this: giving softens my heart. Apostle John said it like this: but whoever has the world's goods and sees someone in need and closes his heart against him, how can the love of God be in them? I'll put this in context. He's saying if you have in your ability, within your resources, to help someone that you see in need, and you choose not to do that, here's how he says it: if you close your heart, in other words, if you kind of wall yourself off from that need, if you ignore that need, then how does the love of God live in that heart? The more I ignore giving, generosity in my life, the harder my heart gets. It's kind of like a callus. All of us have a callus on our hand somewhere, right? And how'd that callus develop? You know, it came over time, and a layer of skin peeled away, and then it got a little thicker, and it got a little thicker, and now the nerve endings are kind of dead in that spot, and we don't really feel anything that hits that callus. And that's what happens to our heart. It happens a little bit at a time, a little bit at a time, and all of a sudden, now we've deadened any feeling. And giving actually helps soften my heart, helps make my heart more pliable, helps me to be more sensitive. I'm learning that my need to give is often greater than whatever it is I'm giving to needs that resource. I've been trying to figure out how to share this illustration because it was such a powerful moment in my life personally. It was such a marker. You know, you have moments that just are big marker moments for you. I was friends with a gentleman named Bud Paxton. Bud just recently passed away a few months ago. Bud was the founder of Home Shopping Network. At one point, Home Shopping Network was doing almost $3 million an hour in people calling in, buying stuff. So we are consumers. And he sold that, and then he started a thing called Pax Television Network. And after he became a Christian, we met right at that time. And got connected in a lot of different ways. And twice a year, there were 5 of us who would go somewhere, and we would just talk about what God was doing in our life, and we'd weigh in and hold each other accountable and kind of lean in on each other. And twice, Bud invited us to do that on his yacht, like a really big boat. And I have to admit, I was really excited about going to do this, and I got there the very first time, flew in, and we were taking over, and it was getting on the yacht, and his crew of 13 or 20 was greeting us, and I mean, this was big. This was 4 decks, and my room, the bedroom I was in, had a king-size bed, Italian marble in the bathroom off my bedroom. The dining room had a table that could seat 14 at this big round room. The main living parlor area, there were 3 kind of areas of recreation, but the main one had a baby grand piano and 6 sofas in it. This was a really big boat. And I remember calling one of my friends before we left the port to say, hey, Dave, there's a world you and I didn't even know existed out here. And I remember thinking, I got to get me one of these. And so we were headed off. We were going through the Panama Canal, and we got into a storm. And so we had to backtrack to stay out of the storm that was going to be in the area for a day or two. And we pulled into this little country that somewhere I'd not heard, Roatan. And we went into the harbor, and we were parked in the harbor. And then we were going to have dinner. And we were seated in the back, the very back. There was this like open air deck area in the back, and it was just this really great setting, and the weather was calm there, so it was gorgeous out. And they came in, and they gave us this choice for food, and there really wasn't anything that I could think of that wasn't there. And it was, then so here comes all this food, and it was just really great stuff, and it was on the table, and we started to eat. And I was enjoying this. And I heard some noise behind me, and I turned to look, and about 20 yards away, back along where the seawall was and up along kind of the harbor area, there was a storage facility. And along that storage facility were a number of lean-tos. Some were cardboard, some were plywood, some were made out of the corrugated metal that were just leaning against the wall. And here come a number of people, and it looked like 3 or 4 families and a bunch of little kids, all naked and running around, having a great time. And then they put out a little it's like a little small campfire, a little grill thing that they, and I saw them set their pots on there, and they started chopping up some carrots and stuff. I could just see what they were doing. They were throwing in this pot. And it was for me such a phenomenally disconnect moment for what I was experiencing and what I was seeing. It was like God whacked me with a 4x4 in the heart. And here's the marker moment. That was the first time that I knew, that I actually felt that I was more needy than those people back 20 yards behind me. Because we get consumed by our stuff. And we think we need those things to somehow make our lives work. Giving softens my heart. Giving also inoculates my heart. It's kind of a vaccination against a disease. We need those, right? There's enough stuff going around. We don't want to catch any of that. The disease most of us suffer in the U.S. is affluenza. We simply have no idea how much stuff we have, and so most of us have no idea all the stuff we have. You know, one of the fastest growing things that's happening in the U.S. are storage units, so we can put our stuff in those places, right? So I love what the comedian Stephen Wright said. You can't have everything. Where would you put it? Well, we're finding places right now, right? We're trying to get more stuff. We need more things, and giving actually helps inoculate my heart against that. Giving also refreshes my heart. Solomon said, a generous man will prosper. He who refreshes others will himself be refreshed. And that's what happens when we give. The giving does something for me. Generosity does something for me. If you want to be a consumer, consume that. There's something beneficial that happens in my life as a result when I'm giving up some of what I have to others. Jesus said, it is more blessed to give than it is to receive. We all know that one. Here's what Jesus was saying. There is something that goes on in your heart when you're giving. There is something that happens to you that you're actually the beneficiary of when you're giving. And so over the years, I've been trying to learn to be more generous. And I'm grateful because Diane on this journey has actually been the one who's been more generous than I am. And we've been growing in that. And so we give, and our giving, we choose to give, and our first giving happens here at LifeBridge. Why? Because I think there's a biblical mandate for us to give to the local church that we're a part of, that we're connected to. And so we give here, and while the Old Testament standard was 10%, and there really isn't a New Testament standard, we chose to start there. And so LifeBridge gets at least 10% of our income every year. And we do that because, one, we believe this is the place we get blessed by. We're grateful for the way the children's ministry and student ministry took care of our kids when they were growing up, and we're thankful for the ways our church serves and in our community and how those dollars get multiplied in the lives of some others and things that happen across the world. And so we give in this place. And our first giving comes here. And so we've chosen to make that at least 10%. And then if we want to give to other things, we do. And so we support kids like many of you do in other parts of the world. And we have missions that we support. And we get involved when there's disaster relief. And more often than not, in ways that we don't even actually get any tax break on, we give to people when we see a need. And here's what I've been learning. I've never been able to outgive God. That doesn't mean there haven't been some financial stressors. That doesn't mean that there have been some times we've been stupid with our money. That doesn't mean that there aren't times that we've been challenged. But here's what I've learned, that as I give, God does something in my heart that benefits me. And I need to give because I am so desperately needy. There's too much stuff. And it gets a hammerlock in my life. And so I want to encourage your giving. And I want you to think about how your giving impacts here. If you're a regular part of LifeBridge, if you're visiting, this isn't for you. If you're a regular part of LifeBridge, I think not only do we have an opportunity, but a responsibility to be giving in this place because of what God does here in our lives. And then if there are other things you want to give to, I think that's a great thing when we give to stuff that means something to us and connects with others. And one of the things that Diane and I decided to do, that when we saw a need, we weren't going to say, well, I think we'll give less to the church this week so we can give more to that other thing. We've said, you know what, let's give to that because we think God's leading us to do that as well. Because I think giving makes a difference. In a couple of weeks, we're going to be shifting up how we collect offerings here in our church. And there's a number of reasons we're doing that. First of all, I want to encourage you, if you're a regular part of our church family, to move to some kind of electronic giving. Online giving is a great way. It's one of the things that really helped us give. Diane's out of town some, I'm gone some, and sometimes we would miss an offering time, and then all of a sudden it'd be 3 or 4 weeks when we somehow had missed, and now we're trying to catch up from that, and you know what that's like to do. It's kind of hard to catch up. And so now we set our giving up. So as soon as our paycheck hits, the first thing that happens is our gift gets made over here to LifeBridge. And it's been a great discipline for us, and it's really helping us. So I want to encourage you to do online giving because I think it'll help you be more regular. I think it'll help you be more faithful in your commitment to what you want to do. We're going to start a texting platform, and I think you received a card as you came in. Just simple way on your mobile device. It's really easy to set up. You can make it recurring. You can do it one time. However you want to choose it. It's a great little app that takes about 7 seconds after you've set it up, a few minutes to set it up, where, again, giving can be done electronically for you. I want to encourage that. We recognize that that's a significant opportunity and need that all of us have to make that easier for us. And then we're also going to be collecting our offering like out in some receptacles out in the door or out in the lobby, just small little places. We're no longer going to be passing the baskets here during the service. We think giving is personal between you and the Lord. We think giving is something we do because we choose to give, and we want you to give. We're still going to talk about offering, what our offerings do to make a difference, but how we collect that offering is going to shift in a few weeks' time. Most of all, we want you to experience what God does in our lives when we choose to be dependent on Him, when we choose to give. How needy are you? Let's pray together. Father, thank you for the privilege we have of gathering in here today. And Lord, thanks for meeting us at our point of need, whatever that is. And Father, help us to find ways to be generous with whatever it is. And it isn't about our amount. It is about what it means to us, what it costs us, Father. And so I'm grateful for the ways that you have blessed in so many ways. And Lord, help me to not get trapped by my stuff. We pray in Jesus' name. Amen.
Stand together.